please, my understanding is if you have questions for Kirk, post them in the chat channel. So, or you can shoot me a text, whatever, or email, and I'll figure it out. Okay, Kirk.
Great. Thank you. And welcome everybody. And I think they'll pull up my slides as I make my opening comment. So this is for us, Elizabeth and I, Town Hall number 2. We'll do about 20 of these this fall semester, and really enjoy our opportunities to be out, interact with the leadership teams, with our faculty and staff, answer questions that you all might have. We really like doing these in person. It's great to sort of see things that are happening when we're there. Since we can't do that, we think this is the next best thing. So anyway, first, to our faculty and staff, just want to express my appreciation for all the work that you continue to do in these really, really challenging times. I know people have issues around healthcare, may have children at home that are doing remote learning. Then you've got all the things with work and research and things like that to put on top of that. So thank you for your efforts. Make sure you're taking time for yourselves. Make sure you take those breaks when you need it. I think we're in this for the long haul, and it's really important that we don't look upon this as a sprint, but more like a marathon. So we really appreciate that. We will continue to make decisions as a senior leadership team that we think are important for the health and safety of our faculty, staff, and students. I also will say that I am under no illusions that everybody always agrees with our decisions, what we decide to do, what we don't decide to do. We're going to be open, transparent, share data with you, let you know why we're doing what we're doing, how we're thinking about it. We're going to do that through town halls like this, university-wide town halls. Our different campuses are doing that, social media channels, monthly newsletters. We want to make sure that you have to work really, really hard to be uninformed. And we also want to make sure that we don't inundate you with so much other stuff that, you get the eye roll when you see that email pop in from the president or provost. So we're going to try and balance that out. But if anytime you have questions, concerns, things like that, reach out to Mark, reach out to me personally, Elizabeth, let us know. So next slide, please. Oop, go back one. There we go. Thank you. Washington State University acknowledges that its locations statewide are in the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region from time immemorial. The university expresses its deepest respect for and gratitude to these original caretakers of the region. As an academic community, we acknowledge our responsibility to establish and maintain relationships with the Native peoples in support of tribal sovereignty and the inclusion of their voices in teaching, research, and programming. We also pledge that these relationships will consist of mutual trust, respect, and reciprocity. So with that, I am pleased to introduce to you Dr. Elizabeth Chilton, our newest provost and executive vice president. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Thank you very much, Kirk. If you could advance the slide, please. I'll start off by saying that I'm very happy to be joining you today for the virtual town hall meeting, although of course I wish it were in person. I began my position as WSU's provost and executive vice president on July 15th. I moved from Pullman to Pullman from New York State in late June with my son, who is a rising college sophomore, and my husband, who like myself is a professor of anthropology, and our 2 rambunctious dogs pictured in the middle there. My research specialization is the archaeology of Northeastern North America. There I'm pictured doing archaeology in a much younger version of myself. And in particular, I focus on Native American history, ecology, and subsistence prior to European colonization. After spending 5 years at Harvard University post-PhD, I then spent 15 years at UMass Amherst as a faculty member, department chair, center director, and lastly, the associate vice chancellor for research and engagement. I then served as Dean of Arts and Sciences at Binghamton University in New York for 3 years before joining the Cougar community this summer. I am just 8 weeks into my position, 8 weeks yesterday, and the day-to-day COVID response work takes up much of my time, as I know it does all of you as well. But some of the issues I'm excited to work with you all on over the next 6 months and beyond. First of all, creating meaningful and productive system-wide partnerships and addressing issues of systemness. A broad commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we'll talk about a little bit in our presentation today, and also promoting and modeling a whole life philosophy for faculty and staff. Kirk's emailed to the campus community, and he will say more about this today. But part of supporting equity and inclusion is being kind to ourselves and to one another, and especially during these trying times, that's critically important. So thank you again for attending today's town hall, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
And I've successfully remembered generally to unmute myself, so I haven't started talking to the screen yet. I don't know if the rest of you do that, but that is a frequent occasion, and thank goodness my computer pops up and reminds me that I'm on mute. In previous years, those of you who have attended these, we've been very data heavy. We felt this year, with all of us suffering a little bit from Zoomitis, that we're going to go a little lighter on data, a little more stories about some successes that we had at WSU. And then yesterday, we did our first one of these for engineering. We've cut out a couple slides. We're going to try and shorten it up so that we have some additional time for questions and dialogue and things at the end. So with that, really pleased with a lot of the progress WSU continues to make, and excited to share some of those things with you. So next slide. So some recent institutional achievements. We completed our first WSU system plan for the next 5 years. And Chris Hoyt, Chief of Staff in my office, has led this initiative. And we're going to have to feel our way a little bit forward because we've never had a WSU system strategic plan. A lot of our campuses have had those, but we tended to do a plan where it was Pullman, and what was good for Pullman was good for the WSU system and vice versa. And Elizabeth will talk later. We actually have a planning process going for WSU Pullman as a separate campus and as an integral part of the system as opposed to the system itself. We're really excited to launch a new Center for Research in Emerging Infectious Diseases in Nairobi, Kenya. This is part of WSU's Global Health Kenya program. It's funded by a $7.6 million grant from the National Institute of Health, and will be led by Karuki Jenga, who is our newest member of the National Academy of Medicine, was just inducted a year or two ago, and we're excited to continue to make a difference, not just here in the United States regionally, but abroad as well. One of the other things we want to continue to do is support industry in the state of Washington. And many of you know in the last campaign, we built a state-of-the-art Wine Science Research Center, the St. Michel Estates Wine Science Center on our Tri-Cities campus in Richland. But what we hadn't done is moved a program forward that was very specific to this. So under the direction of Andre Wright and Chancellor Sandra Haynes, we created this last year a new Department of Viticulture and Enology. This will be housed in the Tri-Cities, and it's really important if you're going to put a state-of-the-art research center right in the middle of wine country. We want to make sure our students are utilizing that location to work with folks actually making, producing wine, marketing wine out there. And so all of the students their last 2 years at a minimum will be at the Tri-Cities campus in that state-of-the-art facilities. And then finally, one of the things that we all want to continue to work on at WSU, regardless location, is around retention. And the Transformative Change Institute is run out of Elizabeth's office. It's system-wide, so we have folks on all of our campuses that are really working on ways to creatively increase student retention. And we've seen already some very promising progress from this, and we want to continue to expand this moving forward. Next slide, please. We also want to always highlight some faculty achievements, and considering the success of our faculty across the WSU system at all of our campuses, we cannot do justice to this on a single slide, but we want to hit a few highlights of this last year. We had 7 faculty members that were elected to the Washington State Academy of Sciences. That was Tim Baszler in the Paul Allen School for Global Animal Health, Kelly Brayton, who's in veterinary Medicine. Laura Greiner Hill serves as Vice Provost for Faculty Development and Affairs and is a professor in Human Development and Connors. Alaire McLean in Sociology and Arts and Sciences. Michael McDonald, who is in the Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine. Sterling McPherson, who is also in the Elson S. College of Medicine. Katrina Mealy, who is in the College of Veterinary Medicine. And Chin Zhang, who's a professor in the Center for Precision and Automated Agricultural Systems, also in Connor. Just really fantastic for 7 of our colleagues to be represented this way. We have several of our Regents faculty members who are very, very active in the Washington Academy of Sciences, and just want to remind everybody, encourage you to nominate your peers, nominate your colleagues for induction in this particular achievement level. We also this last year had 3 of our colleagues that were selected as fellows into the American Academy of Nursing. We had Renee Hoaxel, Shelley Fritz, and Kakab Shoshone will be elected in late October. We only had 230 people nationally that were selected for this particular honor. So congratulations to our colleagues in the College of Nursing. And finally, just recognize Stephen Hines from the College of Veterinary Medicine, who was awarded a 4th place in a national competition around COVID-19 creativity in the classroom. And I know we have many of you out there that are figuring out new ways to interact with our students, new ways to make sure that we're maintaining the relationships that we really like to have when we're doing things face to face. And I suspect we'll have more opportunities for faculty recognition around creativity in instruction and research during this COVID-19 environment. So next slide. We also like to recognize our students. And I know Elizabeth will talk about some of the opportunities and successes that we've seen with students in pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences. Just a couple other ones that we want to point out. Nife Shola Dere was one of 20 students to receive an award from Phi Beta Kappa, one of 20 students nationally, I might add. She's a neuroscience major from Nigeria, member of the Honors College, and received the Phi Beta Kappa's first Key into Public Service Sector Scholar Award. We had 2 Borlaug Scholars, Nikayla Strauss, who's a PhD student in Crop and Soil Sciences, Zara York, who's a PhD student in the Department of Horticulture. There's only 16 of these students that are selected nationally each year, and we had 2 of them at WSU. And then finally, Andrew Given, who's a Doctor of Nursing practice student in Vancouver, is the first nursing student to receive a graduate student fellowship from the Foley Institute for Public Policy and Public Service. We've got lots of cool stuff happening with our students. And the reason we're all here, right, is to continue to work with these exceptional young men and women and help them along their career pathway. And I think it's neat to see this national, regional, and international recognition for some of our students. Next slide, please. Well, I'm an engineer. I couldn't do a whole talk without at least a couple graphs and some data. First, let me congratulate the School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences on cresting $10 million a year in externally sponsored research for the first time ever. What we're seeing, if we look nationally, our comparisons, well, let me back up. What we're seeing is we set a record this last year for research expenditures at WSU with right under $370 million. This is directly attributable to you all. You're writing great proposals. You're writing large proposals. You're successfully competing against your peers, and you're doing a great job with that. This is a faculty hustle factor. What's even more impressive about this, though, if we normalize this to per faculty member basis, you all are outperforming your colleagues at Purdue and Texas A&M. The issue we have is not faculty productivity, it's we don't have enough faculty, and that's something we're going to be working on in the future. But congratulations to everybody. You've done a great job with this, and it's great to see these successes in really challenging times. Next slide, please. Want to highlight just intercollegiate athletics as a little bit of the front porch and front door of the university. This last year, one of our highlights was our women's soccer team finished in the top 4 in the nation. They won 3 or 4 consecutive away games against higher ranked opponents. We've never made the College Cup before, and it was just an exciting run. And I had a chance to meet some of these young women from time to time. And, it's like many of our student athletes the same way. You're like, I'm just so amazed at how they can balance all these different things. We had great academic successes last year in intercollegiate athletics. For the 5th straight semester, WSU student athletes maintained the highest cumulative GPA at 3.17. And for the first time in school history, all of our athletic teams averaged over a 3.0 GPA. That was in the spring semester. Pat Chun, when he was hired as athletic director, said he was going to emphasize the academic nature of student athlete. And he has followed through on that. He's hired coaches that also believe in that. And now we're starting to see some of that. Pat mentions on a frequent basis that if students are great in the classroom, they're going to tend to be great on the field. And if they can't take care of their classroom duties, that means they're probably not able to focus the way that they need to. And I think we're seeing that. Very proud of our student athletes. This last year, Cougar Athletics also raised nearly $27 million in gifts and pledges in cash, which is twice what they did the previous year, which was also a record. So Pat Chun and his team are going out doing a great job of securing external support for intercollegiate athletics. Finally, in this section, philanthropy is going to continue to be important. I'm eager to work with Mark and Linda and your team to continue to talk to alumni and donors and people to invest in the School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. This last year, we had $125 million. A lot of schools are seeing significant decreases in what they thought we could do, what they could do around the country. Really proud of the job that our foundation colleagues, deans, and other academic leaders did. This last year, we had our most major gift was we established through Bruce Admonson and Julie Parker, our second endowed needship. This one is in the Murrow College of Communications. They also endowed the athletic director position as well. Finally, we had a lot of alumni and friends step up during COVID-19 to help and provide money for needy students, food banks, all kinds of things. That was to the tune of $200,000, and we're going to continue to see that sort of investment in giving to support our students in this time of need. Next slide. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth to talk about some of the highlights in pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences.
Thank you, Kirk. First of all, I would like to thank Dean Mark Lead for hosting us and to offer a welcome, or should I say, welcome back. Mark returns to WSU after a remarkable career in France and at Oregon State University as an outstanding scholar and academic leader. This really is a homecoming for Mark. He graduated in 1983, the age of 6, right? Is that it? From WSU College of Pharmacy before the college changed its name. So we're glad you're back, and I look forward to your leadership. So next slide, please. Of course, I'm just getting to know the college, and I learned a great deal more this morning at the leadership team meeting, but I want to highlight just a few things here. First of all, I understand that PharmD students can now get a master's or a certificate in engineering and communications, in addition to our existing dual degrees in MBA and PhD in pharmaceutical sciences and molecular medicine. And this is on top of the college's dedication to our undergraduate students across the state, so even more impressive. The scope of the college's sponsored research continues to expand. In FY20, the college generated over $10 million in research funding, reaching a new milestone. And it's clear that this upward trend will continue under Mark's leadership. Residency matches for students are also very impressive. There were 39 fourth-year students who were matched with an accredited postgraduate year 1 residency, and 2 additional graduates secured an accredited year 2 residency. The residencies are situated across 12 states, including Washington, and are quite diverse, including community pharmacies, health system administration, and leadership. Next slide, please. I want to thank pharmacy faculty, staff, and students for their leadership and generosity in our COVID response. First, almost 24 student pharmacists will be working with Walgreens on the front lines of the drive-through COVID-19 testing in the Spokane area. Faculty and students have also volunteered at drive-through clinics and makeshift test sites. I almost said tent sites, but test sites and tents probably, set up by the National Guard and public health officials in Yakima and Spokane, and with the mobile health unit in Pullman. Several student pharmacists and faculty were also in Pullman with the mobile health unit administering COVID-19 tests. CPPS faculty have also pulled out all the stops to ensure student pharmacists will be certified and ready to administer vaccines this flu season, and of course, a COVID-19 vaccine once it's available. Faculty expert in diabetes Joshua Newmiller was appointed to a panel of experts by the American Diabetes Association to study the impacts of COVID-19 on those living with diabetes. And Dr. Senthil Natisan is doing some really groundbreaking research on the pathways that cause an exaggerated inflammatory response caused by COVID-19 virus. Next slide, please. So a few student and faculty achievements to highlight. I had the pleasure of meeting student Arlie Kayanan yesterday, a fourth-year College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences student at WSU Health Sciences Spokane, and he is serving as the next student regent on the WSU Board of Regents. And other good news, Ann Kim from Yakima Extension and Cotty Remsburg from Spokane have been named new members of the President's Teaching Academy. I think I'm a new member of the Teaching Academy too. I just got my medal in the mail yesterday. I think Kirk and I were both inducted. And the Paul Luzier Foundation awarded Nicholas Grisuli a $47,500 grant to fund patient care services for those experiencing homelessness and in rural communities in the Yakima Valley. Kim McKiernan and her team also received nearly $100,000 from Empire Health Foundation to continue her work with rural populations in Washington State. There is a great deal of stellar and innovative scholarship and outreach in pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences across WSU and across the state, and I certainly look forward to learning more in the months and years to come.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. I want to now just give you a little bit of a brief update on sort of where we are fiscally, as much as we know. The first thing I want to mention is that we will continue to keep campuses and faculty and staff and students informed as we have data and information. And I want to emphasize this because I think so often people feel they've got information, they're not willing to share it, or they don't want to put it out there, or it's bad news or whatever. And so as an example, if you say, well, Kirk, what's it going to look like next year? What's our budget reduction target going to look like, from the legislature and so on? For lots of reasons, and, I'm not privy to them, there just doesn't look like there's going to be a special session of the legislature to deal with some of the challenges we see in the Washington state budget. So that means that we are going to probably go into January without a lot of new information besides maybe what the cumulative reduction in state revenues is going to look like. So when you say, well, Kirk, what about this or what about that? We will keep you informed. We're going to let you know, but we want to be factual. We want to make sure that we're not sending you something that is hyperbole or politically tinged or something like that. So we'll keep everybody updated. That's the bottom line. What I'm showing here is the same slide and the same graph that many of you have seen if you've attended these over the last 5 years. And I can remember showing this my first year when basically we had the green bar in 2013, which showed at that particular time we were generating about $25 million more in revenue than we were expending as a system. Then what would happen is we initiated a whole series of different initiatives at the next year. And the worst was in FY 2017, we overspent our money coming in by about 30 million. You say, well, how do you do that? Well, what we were doing is simply burning through our reserves. And if you remember then, we started in FY 2017, a 3-year recovery. The idea was to reduce our deficit by 10 million each year. So the idea was in FY 2018, have a $20 million annual operating deficit. By FY 2019, make that 10, and by FY 2020 to be back operating at least at a break-even point each year. Thanks to your efforts, the efforts of our academic deans, vice presidents, and chancellors, we've exceeded those targets. And so in FY 2018, instead of overspending by 20, we overspent by a little less than 10, about 7. Last fiscal year, we actually finished with a little bit of a surplus. In this FY 20 fiscal year, we finished with nearly a $28 million surplus. Now, I keep looking under my desk every morning, hopeful that I'm going to find big bales of money, $28 million to be specific, that we could use for salaries, and we could use for initiation of new programs, and taking the new ideas that you all as faculty and staff have that are really worthy of strategic investment by the university. Where these dollars are, though, these are in the colleges and units. They're the units that generated those have those reserves. And whether that's pharmacy and pharmaceutical sciences or WSU Vancouver, College of Engineering, every one of those is going to be a little bit different. There's some of this that is central reserves, but a really small portion of that. What we did, because the fiscal recovery went so well, as we're dealing with state revenue shortfalls, we've allowed different units to actually spend some of those reserves to help get us through this next fiscal year. So congratulations to everybody. It's amazing to see where we are today compared to where we were in FY 2016, 2017. We've seen increased revenues, and people have been very, very careful about hiring and spending, and it shows. You can imagine the challenges we would be in if we were dealing with COVID-19 and a budget situation like we had in FY 2017. So well done by everybody. Next slide, please. So now we want to finish the final portion of our kind of prepared comments and go to questions here soon. So system strategic plan implementation. One of the things that my experience coming into WSU had shown is we had a group of faculty and staff that worked really hard on a strategic plan. The university's had strategic plans for a while, but if you said, well, Kirk, how did you use a strategic plan for decision making, and how is a strategic plan tied into budget? If you want to see the strategy of an organization, follow the money. A lot of people have heard that. I think that's really a truism. And so what it is it's not just a new strategic plan because you have a new administration. It's got to be tied into budget, and it's got to actually help guide our decision making. And that means that there may be opportunities that come up that we have to say, is this strategically where we want to go? That means sometimes you got to say no. It also means that I can't wake up one morning and decide we're going to do something. It can't be a president, we have a strategic plan, and then if I decide to do something, that's going to be our new strategy. It's really important that we use this in our decision making and put in place a process for working with you all as faculty and staff to make those decisions moving forward. October 8th, which we normally would have had kind of a all hands on deck kind of day of meetings around some strategic initiatives. We're going to be doing stuff virtually. We're going to do them short so that more faculty and staff can be involved and engaged, and it won't be an all-day thing. It'll all be virtual. We'll have more details. One of the things that came up out of a lot of our conversations on land-grant universities, extension, and rural healthcare, and how we tie those things more closely together. And we're going to really be engaged more strategically around those conversations that are already ongoing by many of you, but we want to take it to the next level, next step, and make sure we're providing financial support and a focus, frankly, on this, and then measuring that success. Next slide. System roles and responsibilities is something that has continued to come up as something that needs to be addressed. And Elizabeth has experience in 2 other systems. I've got some experience in this space as well. And we had a group of colleagues that I've communicated through my letters that worked on a pathway forward on system roles and responsibilities. What we need to do is articulate ways the WSU system strengthens the institution. Our geographic diversity, the fact we're in different places of the state, should be seen as a strength and should allow WSU to do things that we can't otherwise. I think in the report, one of the interesting comments is they say we operate as a matrix organization with all the disadvantages of that and none of the advantages. So how do we recognize that our physical campuses, our extension centers, our teaching locations that are scattered all through the state represent a real strength for us, and where are areas that we can streamline and do things as a system that doesn't make sense to replicate 5, 10, or 30 times the way that we sometimes do. The answers aren't easy, but we're going to explore that over the next year. In my letter to campus this next month, I'm going to talk about more meaningful campus designations. We're going to start referring to Pullman as our flagship campus. We're going to start referring to things like Tri-Cities and Vancouver as regional comprehensive campuses and so forth. I'll define some of those out there. To me, we need to operate as a set of interconnected geographic locations that are trying to work together to advance things in the state of Washington. We're not Pullman in a hub and spoke model. And we haven't operated that way for a long time, but we've got to start thinking creatively about how we can do this. I want to emphasize that in roles and responsibilities, this is not code for we're going to hire a whole bunch more additional administrators. We're going to work with the administrative team we have and just define clearly who's responsible for what, put that out there, make sure we're having dialogue and discussion on it, and continue to move forward. Next slide, please. I think, is this me or you, Elizabeth? No,
Yeah.
Sorry, it's obvious that is. Let me look and see. This is Elizabeth. So.
Yes, as Kirk mentioned, the Pullman strategic plan is really critical. As he said, as the flagship and largest campus, we really need to have a distinct Pullman strategic plan in order to make sure that it isn't seen as the default for the system. Each of the physical campuses really needs to have its own strategic planning process, and we'll be initiating that this fall. Craig Parks will be chairing that, and the committee includes 20 faculty, staff, and students from across the system. So that will take place this coming academic year. Next slide, please. Another critical part of the strategic planning process, as Kirk mentioned, is tying this to budget decisions. And strategic plans are only effective if you plan carefully how you're going to allocate resources to support them. So while there has been excellent fiscal recovery, as Kirk outlined, given the significant impact of the pandemic on the university budget, it's even more important now than ever to look at the allocation of resources and long-term efficiencies and expenses and operations. Vice President Stacy Pearson and I will be co-chairing a new executive budget committee, and the charge of the group is to lead the development of system-wide resource allocation to support the new strategic plan and the system. So we'll be engaging the system community and understanding the current resource allocation models and exploring national best practices. We'll be establishing guiding principles for desired changes to the current resource allocation, and then proposing specific changes, and throughout really facilitating transparency and informative budget communications. We hope to have our work completed by the summer of 2021. So a busy year in terms of strategic planning. Next slide, please. Archaeologists like data too, and I did want to provide an update on our enrollment, since many of you have been asking about system-wide enrollment. So this is preliminary data, unofficial. Our system-wide enrollment is down slightly, but happily less than 2% from the all-time record last fall. Ethnic diversity is still just over 30%, and the percentage of first-generation students system-wide is also about 32%. In Pullman, at the Pullman campus, our enrollment will be down about 1,100 students. That's to about 19,800. in part because of a number of freshmen deferring to spring or to next fall. And we're hoping that that will tick back up. We're hoping for increased enrollment in spring and then next fall. WSU Health Sciences has the largest enrollment in its history at 1,730 students. And the global campus probably understandably saw the largest increase, enrolling a record of 4,000 students, up nearly 750 from fall 2019. I did want to mention also we're in the process of hiring a vice provost for enrollment management to help us manage enrollment across the physical and global campuses. And we anticipate that search will conclude in October. We're bringing in the finalists in the next couple of weeks. So next slide, please. I do want to mention a few initiatives coming out of the provost area for supporting diversity, equity, inclusion, but I think Kirk has a few updates from the system first.
Great, Elizabeth, thank you. This is certainly an area that we want to keep working in. And first, we want to continue the work of the 5 working groups. And many of you remember 2017, we had some student, faculty, and staff appropriately feel that the senior administration of the university was not adequately addressing some of our need to move forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives more aggressively. Those 5 working groups have done a great job of writing things up. I appreciate Vice President for Student Affairs, Mary Jo Gonzalez, Jamie Nolan, Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusive Excellence in Student Affairs, have really done a great job shepherding and leading those things forward. One of the things that we want to do is set up a new President's Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and we hope to have an announcement on that next month. We want to be mindful that, one, it's important to do, but people are also pretty maxed out right now on what they're trying to do, and we want to make sure we have the right representation on this particular group and that they continue the work of the 5 working groups. Elizabeth and I have monthly meetings right now with the Black Faculty and Staff Association, and what we want to do is we're discussing with them creative ways to not just recruit Black faculty and staff at WSU across all of our campuses, but how do we set up mentoring networks, and how do we ensure retention? So it's not just recruitment, it's also retention. Elizabeth will talk about that a little bit sooner. And then Chancellor Mel Netzhammer and Zoe High Eagle Strong are co-chairing a group to look at a lot of our policies that the university's had for a long time through an equity lens, and ask ourselves, you know, does this make sense? It was done 20 years ago. Is this done in a meaningful way? Does this carry prejudice or issues with it just by the way we do things? And that group is met for the first time, and we'll have an announcement out to the system sometime in the next week or so on that membership group. So those are just want to emphasize that when Black Lives Matter movement has been hit the summer, these are initiatives and things that we've been working on for a while. And I want to emphasize its continuity of continuing to work in this area that's really important. And that while we have moments of our time as an institution where we need to step it up, it shouldn't mean that we're not doing anything until we get to that point. So Elizabeth, I know you've got some new initiatives you're bringing in and focusing on. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So I'm really excited to say that this fall WSU will launch a new cluster hire, a faculty cluster hire in racism and social inequality in the Americas. And the goal is to seek scholars who will contribute to work in this area and help lead institutional transformation at WSU. In recent years, academic institutions have utilized cluster hires to attract and to retain a more diverse faculty, and I have done so at my 2 previous institutions. Cluster hires allow the building of cohorts of scholars who can support and mentor each other, as well as mentor all of us. Aside from recruiting and retaining a more diverse faculty, when you pair this with an explicit network-based mentoring program, these cluster hires can transform the institution through the building of new curricula, research foci, and community engagement. And I know Dean Lead is aware of the draft of this. And despite what you heard previously, Mark, you should feel free to share this with the word draft written across it. And I would love to have feedback on the proposal as it stands now. We will also be, there has been a position in the Provost area, Associate Vice Provost for Inclusive Excellence, and that position has been vacant since May. And so we'll be launching an internal search. This is not an external search, but an internal search for someone who's currently an associate or full professor for an Associate Vice Provost for Inclusive Excellence, who will bring leadership to academic affairs, building on the previous work that Kirk mentioned, and continuing to coordinate with existing diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in student affairs, in the Office of Compliance and Civil Rights, institutional research, human resources, and across the system. And then finally, you know, we all know that professional leaves are an important opportunity for our tenure stream faculty in advancing their scholarship. And in the past, I understand that it was an unspoken and unwritten rule that one was expected to be physically distanced from one's home institution or home campus during such a leave. And it's clear that making such a condition disadvantages those who have caregiving obligations or economic constraints. So in the next call in mid-September, we are going to make it clear that the physical location of a sabbatical will not be a criteria for evaluation of the potential effectiveness of the leave. This is an example of the kinds of policies and procedures that Kirk mentioned that we really need to take a look at, especially now. So that's it. I think I turn it back over to you.
Well, when I was working at Kansas State University prior to my time at WSU, I said there cannot be a university out there that has a more antiquated data and financial system than we did at K-State. And I successfully found it at WSU. So Workday, we have needed to update our backbone systems for decades. And this is a 4-year project. We started it in 2016. And in January, we expect to be able to go live with an awful lot of the parts of Workday. There has been countless number of employees and people on here that have worked really, really hard to make sure this is a smooth transition. As a reminder, originally we were going to go live July 1, but what wound up happening is because of COVID-19 and because of some of the implementation plans, we just felt it was more prudent to wait till January. University training is going to start in a significant way in October. There's going to be 31 different training courses available, reference guides, 30 video or self-paced learning experiences. I would urge all of you to get involved and engaged in learning a bit about how you'll be able to do things. It's been hard to make data-based decisions sometimes when you can't get data, or somebody gives it to you and say, well, what about this? And they go, well, it'll take me 3 weeks now of pushing paper to get that. We should be in a position relatively soon over this next academic year to be able to make much better decisions that way. I will say this, right? Any project, and many of you have been involved in big, massive projects, you work, you prepare, you do everything you can to make sure it's smooth. There are bound to be some bumps in the road, but I think I appreciate our modernization team and all the work they've done in this regard. So with that, next slide. Thank you. We appreciated the opportunity to do a little bit of PowerPoint slides, and I've been watching the participants, and it hasn't dropped off precipitously yet. So thank you for being with us. And Mark, Elizabeth and I are happy to be here, answer some questions, and talk about anything that people would like. So thank you.
Thank you, Kirk and Elizabeth. That was fantastic. Kirk, you answered a question in the chat channel already. I think we probably don't need to go into more detail there. I did receive a question from Teams, and so I'll just forward that on to you verbally. I guess the 800-pound gorilla is spring semester. And, you know, I know that we're considering we will have an answer by mid-October on that. But I just wonder what are what factors need to be in place for some amount of face-to-face classroom instruction type things in the spring term.
Yeah, and I'll ask Elizabeth to also weigh in on this. A couple things. Believe it or not, I don't make most of my decisions with a magic 8-ball. You know, I think people sometimes obviously question, you know, why did you wait so long to make the decision about fall term? And I can remember vividly everybody in student affairs and academic affairs was pushing really hard in Pullman in particular to be ready for an in-person experience. And I had one of the VPs call me and say, Kirk, you know, you need to start asking some questions about people's confidence level. And we all want to be there. We want to do it if we can. I remember specifically asking some of the other vice presidents, and to a person, they said, there is no way we can have everybody here and safe and make it through Thanksgiving. And so the decision-making and the criteria for fall wasn't as quantitative as we probably would have liked. And I think appropriately people criticize, well, if you're gonna make this decision, why didn't you make it a month ago? It would have been easier from a planning. So Elizabeth and her team, Mary Jo Gonzalez and her team have all emphasized, let's pick a date. And I think mid-October is really where we are right now to make a call on what we want to do. And it's not Elizabeth and I sitting down over a nice scotch and making the decision for the university. We want to engage our deans, academic units, faculty and staff as much as possible. And I'm under no illusion that we're going to make a decision, whatever it might be, that everybody's going to agree with. But I think the timeliness of it's going to be really, really important. What we're seeing around the country too is places that have massive testing programs and all this are having the same challenge we're having in Pullman because we all were worried about how many people per dorm room, and do we have a quarantine space for on-campus students, and distancing in the classrooms. And where so much of the outbreak has occurred nationally on college campuses has been off campus. And I don't think anybody was particularly well prepared to deal with some of the off-campus things at large publics with a lot of people on and off. And so we've learned a lot in the last 3 weeks to 4 weeks that should help us inform our decision making. So I know that's evasive and you go, well, Kirk, you haven't given a quantitative answer and all those things. I do think this time we want to engage the campus community in a really good way. And finally, I will say some places it got so bad between the faculty and administration that the faculty were talking about suing their own administration to avoid being in in-person environments. We have noted, you know, we want to work collaboratively on this kind of decision-making. And I think that's an important part of what we did. And I'm proud of the fact that we avoided those types of massive conflicts with faculty and staff at WSU. And I want to make sure we keep that style of collaborative decision-making moving ahead. Elizabeth?
Yes, certainly, you know, very much in line with what Kirk said. We really want to have as much input and inform these decisions with as much, you know, qualitative and quantitative data, if there are such. So for example, normally we would be releasing the course schedule around October 1st. So that students could start working with advisors and planning for the spring. We're going to delay that a couple of weeks because the decision about how much in-person instruction there will impact the schedule itself. But we are committed to a spring semester. We are committed to the curriculum that we had already scheduled. At this point, we know what classes we have scheduled for spring on all of our physical campuses. The question really just is about the mode of delivery. So I'll be working with the deans. I've already been discussing this with President's Cabinet. I'm meeting with the Faculty Senate tomorrow. We're meeting with student leadership on really just the curricular piece. You know, spring we had to switch on a dime to remote instruction, and that was bumpy across the nation. I did it in New York, and it was as bumpy as I'm sure it was here. This fall, we learned some lessons, and we had so many people working with Global over the summer to beef up their skills and their pedagogical assessment of their classes, so that this fall, we want to know how things are going. One of the things I'm going to talk to the Faculty Senate about is redoing the survey they did at the end of the spring to say, okay, how's it going this semester? And what lessons are we learning that will help us maintain instructional quality regardless of what we do in the spring? We're also have only just in the past week really beefed up our testing. And I think that will be, personally, I think that will be a critical piece because if we intend to open the doors any more than we have this fall, we need to be able to reassure people that we have the spread of the virus under control, not only our students, but our faculty, staff, and the communities that we serve. So those to me seem to be the critical pieces. If we could release a schedule by mid-October, that would be ideal. We may not have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed by that point in terms of on-campus housing, et cetera. But I think we need to start letting people know what we do know so that we can give certainty wherever we can.
Thank you both. I get a lot of questions about the over-under on faculty and staff furloughs, and I wonder if you could take a second to address that.
So we originally had talked with deans, vice presidents, chancellors about a need to do a furlough program for this fiscal year. And as a matter of fact, that planning had gone a long ways down the road. There was the major issue with the planning was it was going to disproportionately affect a certain segment of our population. It was going to be predominantly around staff and career track faculty. And our own faculty senate and others just said, you know, this really reeks of unfairness and it's inappropriate and things like that. Then as the fiscal recovery information, which I shared, hit, Stacey Pearson and her team said, I think we can manage it, and talking with the deans and others without doing that this year. And look, I don't want to have to furlough or cut anybody's salary. I prefer that we not have to do that. So this fiscal year, we don't believe that we're going to have to do a system-wide type of program. Now, particular units, athletics has had to do some furloughs because of their budget situation, and they're going to announce some additional furloughs, I think, tomorrow. So there are certain units on campus that have had to do that, but campus-wide, we don't see that. That being said, if you say, well, Kurt, what about July 1 of 2021, and where are we going to be that fiscal year, and does this mean we're not going to have to do that? We just don't know. And we won't know until the legislature lets us know what those dollars are going to have to be, what cuts might be there, what levers we can pull. And so it's going to be frustrating to employees going, well, how come you can't tell me, or how come I don't know? My preference is we not do it. But if on the other hand, we come back with some huge, massive cut, and that's the only way we can sort of manage it, we will do that. I will say any furlough program will be graduated. The higher paid employees will have to take more of a cut, and that includes executives and others than employees below a certain wage. And I think we are really sensitive to, there's a certain number at which those employees should take zero furlough. So I think we're going to be careful in the way we do that, but that's not my preference moving forward if we can avoid it.
Thank you, Kirk. I have no more questions in the chat channel. And so I will take the opportunity to again thank you both for coming up to Spokane, if only electronically, and sharing your answers to these questions with us is very much appreciated. And I'll give you back 2 minutes of your time so that you can have a time windfall before your next gig.
All right.
Okay.
Mark and colleagues, thank you. Appreciate it. And if there's questions you had that we did not get to, send them to Mark, send them to Elizabeth or I directly, and we'll make sure we get those answers out to you. So thank you very much.
Yeah, let me just add one thing, Kirk. You reminded me of something. If there are students on the line, I am having individual town halls with each year of the professional program this month. I think I'll complete them all this month. So I'd be happy to answer any class-specific questions during those town halls. Thanks again to you both, and really appreciate your time, and good luck with the rest of these things.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.